The inferior tool. On the inferior, function as doorway. A carpenter had a toolbox, and in the toolbox he had 4 tools. The first was a saw, the second was a plane, the third was a chisel, the fourth was a small wooden mallet, soft, never sharp, of an awkward weight, and the carpenter had despised it from the day he had bought it. He could not, at this point in his life, remember why he had bought it. It must have come as part of a set. He had never used it for any serious work. He kept it at the bottom of the toolbox under the other 3. He took it out only to move it aside. The saw was, in his opinion, a magnificent saw. It cut clean and fast. He had built his reputation on the saw. People in the next town spoke of the smoothness of his cuts. The plane was almost as good as the saw. It was sharp. It was true. It produced shavings as fine as paper. The chisel was his pride. He had inherited it from his father. He could carve with the chisel faces in oak and roses in pine and small running animals in the corners of his doors. People came from the next province to commission carvings. The mallet he never spoke of. The mallet was simply there beneath the others, soft and clumsy and never sharp. One autumn, after a winter of unusual cold and a summer of unusual rain, the carpenter discovered on the same morning that all 3 of his good tools had failed. The saw had snapped clean across its blade. The plane had warped from the damp and could no longer hold its edge. The chisel, which he loved most, had a hairline crack across the head. The next blow would shatter it. He was due that very morning to build a small chest for a widow whose husband had just died. He had promised. He had taken the materials. He had no time to send for new tools. He stood in front of his toolbox in despair and then, after a long moment, reached down and lifted the mallet from the bottom. The mallet was as he had remembered it, soft, clumsy, never sharp, of an awkward weight. He took it to the widow's house with the timber and his nails and began to work. He could not cut with the mallet. He could not plane. He could not carve. He could only with patience set the joints together and tap them home. He worked slowly. He had to think differently. He had to plan the chest so that no piece needed to be cut after it had been laid, and no piece needed to be planed after it had been joined, and no piece needed to be carved after it had been raised. He had to imagine the chest whole before he touched any of the wood. He had never done this before. With his 3 sharp tools, he had always worked his way into a piece as he went. The chest he built now was not built as he went. It was built in his head first, and then assembled with the soft, clumsy, never sharp mallet. It took him 4 days instead of 1. When the chest was finished, the widow wept. It was, she said, the most beautiful chest she had ever seen. There were no carvings on it. There was no smoothness. But there was a quality of inward consideration in the joining of the wood that her dead husband's hands would have recognized. She would, she said, be buried in it eventually if her sons did not object. The carpenter went home and looked in his workshop at the mallet. "I have despised you for 30 years, he said. "I know," said the mallet. "I have used you only once. You built the best thing I have ever made. I know why." The mallet considered. "Because your sharp tools made it easy for you to never plan," said the mallet. "You worked as you cut. You followed your hand. Your hand was clever. It went where the wood led. The result was always good. It was not in the deepest sense considered. The chest you made today was considered. The consideration came from me. I could not let you work as you went. I forced you to imagine the chest whole before you touched the wood. I am in your toolbox the only tool that does this. The other 3 let you skip the imagining. I do not let you skip. That is why I am the slow, soft, awkward one. The slowness and the softness and the awkwardness are the imagining. They are not flaws, they are the work." The carpenter sat down on his bench. He looked at the mallet for a long time. He had been despising, for 30 years, the only tool that had been waiting to teach him how to make the best thing he could make. He had needed the other 3 to break all at once before he had been forced to touch it. He replaced the saw. He replaced the plane. He repaired the chisel. He kept the mallet at the top of the toolbox after that, where his hand fell on it first. He used it more in the last 10 years of his career than he had used the other 3 combined. The work changed. It became slower. It became less impressive in the easy way. It became more impressive in a way that took a year to be visible. The carvings he had once been famous for, he did less of. The chests and tables he built came to be famous in a quieter way, in farther provinces, for the inward considered quality the widow had recognized. He never threw away the saw, but he understood, by the end of his life, which of the four tools had been the doorway. It had been at the bottom of the box. The tool you despise is the doorway. Your three sharp tools let you work as you go. The soft, clumsy, never sharp one forces you to imagine the whole before you begin. The forcing is the work. The work is what you have been refusing for 30 years. The doorway is at the bottom of the box. The work begins when the other three break.